Hello, welcome to Your Life and to our workshops on the Bach cello suite. Today the Allemande from the second suite, and my guest will be none less than the extraordinary flautist Emmanuel Pahud in about 15 to 20 minutes. Today I want to play first. So this is the first part of this Allemande from the second suite. And as I put in the subtitle of today's workshop, is this singing? Is this telling a story? Is this speaking? Obviously, the reason I asked the question is because I think it's both. So, and it is not contradictory, and it shouldn't be. But the reason I wanted to insist on this, also if you remember in the first Allemande of the first suite, I talked about the storyteller. The Allemande is the moment in the suites where Bach really tells us what he goes in depth into what he has presented in the prelude. And I find this Allemande, this is really one of my favorites of all movements, of all 36 movements. And I find particularly strong the way there is a clear rhetoric, like something quite complex going on. You know, it's probably not a movement on which you want to dance. You rather hear somebody telling us a story. And at the same time, the way he creates something very lyrical, and he does this mainly by having a very expressive dialogue, a very rich one, a very varied one, between mainly two voices, the upper voice and the bass, which in this movement is very active. So already in the first bar we start with our soprano, and then bass solo, and we see already within the first note how he actually by falling with these two notes by two notes, and without knowing really when it happens, we have visited probably a soprano, a middle voice, and a bass voice. And this is going to go to happen very much in this movement and to be essential to its very, very lyrical expression. Just a bit later, when we do our modulation, you hear how we went above the D here in our modulation. Little visit to a lower voice. And now, clearly, he stretches the interval between two voices to create expressivity. A third. My lower voice goes down, the other one answers immediately. And this has created an energy that brings And then here how he goes, he jumps again to the soprano, brings the two voices at one in a very dissonant note. See, again, we visit the lower voices. Bass, soprano. And after all these very telling dialogue, this very dramatic broken cadence, like Bach loves to do them. Remember, we had a very, very spectacular one in the prelude. What you expect, dear listeners, what I expect if I don't know the piece. Yeah, we have reached A minor, which could be the end of the first part, but no, he wants to go on by breaking with this D sharp, by breaking the cadenza and thus putting a question mark that brings us further in the music. And here, what is wonderful is that the next harmony we could expect this, but no, the next harmony is going to be, so we keep descending, and he goes from this very, very special note with an ornament, a very sudden one and very isolated in this piece. It's not like otherwise this movement would be very ornamented, but like if we were under shock from this bass solo. And here comes something very special. Of course, in itself, it's not so spectacular. What Bach does is, again, deceiving your expectation. We expect A minor, and we have a major chord. Now, the two things that make it quite special in my view is that the first one is because of what happened before, that we have been in this A minor world for a long time. Like we went there quite early in the piece, already actually after 5 bars we were in A minor. And then we went around it, and then we have cadenza, broken. We are in A minor, A minor, A minor. So he really lets us soak in the A minor. And then the other reason it's so special is that he doesn't let us play the major that he gives us there, but he lets us first play just this bass note, and then just en passant, you know, passing by. If it was pretending it was not so important, he exposes the major. So I find it very, very special. Another feature, if I can say so, of this Allemande, and which comes very much in the second part, is that remember our Allemande. So we are, so basically we are in half bars and grooving to the middle of the bar. 1 and 2 and 3. So, and what he does a lot in the second part is that he will start this to create, to continue and develop this dialogue between the upper voice and the lower one. He will very often, the upper voice will start a phrase, will take the initiative on the weak beats, on 4, 1, 2, 3. And this gives a lot of expressivity. I play a little bit the second half. See, important modulation starts on the fourth beat, on not at all on a strong beat. 4. Now we start a little pas de deux, a dance, a sequence between soprano like we have many in the Baroque. But listen how Bach, the beauty with which he ornaments it, starting it on the fourth beat. 4. Shortly after. Do you hear how often the bass is being active and is the one that brings us along further in the piece? 2, 3, 4. Expanding the intervals. Again with this dialogue, you hear really like two-person soprano and the bass dialoguing and like maybe sharing their emotions and that way developing them, as you see here for the interval. Higher, lower, higher. Again, going lower with a very expressive interval, a diminished third. And then we finish this Allemande. Remember, now we had a few examples that Bach likes to finish his movement before the actual conclusion with a chromatic line in the bass that raises the tension. And here there is one, and it's one of the most beautiful ones in all 6 suites, because the bass is going to do its chromatic line. But most of the time the bass will not be played on the beat. Remember, that means more expressivity, number one. And number two, the middle voice you will hear is accompanying this chromatic by coming by being itself raised in very unexpected way. You expect a minor here, I expect a minor if I don't know the piece. Yeah, we are in G minor, and what do we have? And what makes it so special, is that this special note, this modulation in the middle voice, is brought again sort of in the melody en passant. The chromatic line of the bass also exposed later. And the last rise as high as it gets in this tonality. And this last bar, I want to share with you a thought that I have had and that will maybe trigger again some questions like the many you have sent me. That it was only recently that I realized that, you remember at the end of the first part we have this unexpected major chord, the tierce picarde, on the last bar of this first part. Well, here we don't know. We have this. Right? So we could say we are in minor, in the contrary to the first time, through the bar. But Bach doesn't specify it, and maybe, and that's free to you cellists particularly as performers, to think, is it maybe... Does it start actually in major to do this Scheinmodulation, we say in German, that's a wonderful word, this emprunt, we say in French, so this going through G minor on the way to our final chord. So really a very, very special movement. As you see, it lies very close to my heart. I had written some question, but I realized, let me look at the time, it's 7:15. So we have just a few minutes left before we go to talk to our guest Emmanuel Pahud. I cannot go, there is a very deep question about memory, but a very long one from Guido Vardak that was sent to me. I will go at it another time. I will now rather, some of you have sent me questions about upbeats and about chords, and I think this beginning is a very good example. So about the upbeat, it's quite simple. I want to share with you what I've learned from Anna Belsma. These upbeats are not rhythmical upbeats. They don't have to give the tempo. They are invitations. They are invitations to the dance that you are now presenting to the Allemande. So don't feel stressed. It's you know, if you invite somebody for a dance, you don't want to say, okay, come now, dance with us. You want to say, please. So you know, let just on the way to your downbeat, just catch this note and let it have the length that it organically has. That's the one thing. The more important thing is, how do you combine this with a 4-note chord that we have here? So, and about the chords, very, very important information I pass on to you from my mentor, Anna Belsma. The pulse of your chord. You have to have a pulse in your chord. Don't let the chord bring you out of the pulse. On the contrary, use them to give the feeling of dance. Where is your dancer, so to say, your virtual dancer, actually putting the foot on the floor? Well, it's on the soprano. It's when you reach your upper note. So it's right here. So I propose to you, practice a few times and then just add one note and always with a round motion. Don't try to catch two notes at once. Don't play double stops. Always a round, slight arpeggio in a way. And then add one more note. And then one more. So I will play now with open string to show the moment where you reach actually the depth of your sound, which is metaphorically where the dancer touches the floor, is when you reach the soprano. And everything else before is like a sort of upbeat that gives you extra time that you are more than welcome to use. Now, we have the great privilege to talk to Emmanuel. Dear Emmanuel, are you with us? Hello, hello, hello. Hello, dear Emmanuel.
Coming in.
Yes, I hear you. I don't see you yet.
Now you will see me. Hello, Jean-Guihen.
Hey, hello, Emmanuel. Wonderful to see you. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. I mean, I'm such a cello specialist and such a Bach specialist at the same time. So I wonder what I'm doing here, and I'm learning so much just by listening to you today and every episode. So thank you for sharing your amazing thoughts about this music. You know, it's vibrant and analytical at the same time, and I think it tells a lot about the complexity of the Bach music, because you can use several aspects to explore it, and the way you do it, you do show both the I would say the vertical and the horizontal, but that would be just a bit too systematic. There's not only two axes, unfortunately. There's probably more than that.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, about your introduction, the reason so far in this series or whatever we call it, I had only one cellist guest because I thought, okay, after I talk for 20 minutes about our cello staff, about our, our problematics, all the challenges that we meet when we are in the suite, we need some broader look. We need some, a vision that is a bit away from the cello, and that's what you all give us. And well, Emmanuel, I wanted to ask you about one thing, because what I've talked about in the episodes before quite a lot is the fact that what's fascinating is that Bach composes 2.5 hours of music almost for a monodic instrument that we have. But sometimes we pretend to be not monodic. We can play chords, as I was showing now at the end. So some chords are being demonstrated, but you play the monodic instrument per essence. I mean, of course, there are some contemporary composers that compose multiphonics, but otherwise you play one note at a time. And I have had the incredible joy to play with you pieces where you take over the violin part, for example, and where you find solutions about the chords, about things, and you transcend them. But what I mean to say is that even in the pieces by Bach for flute, for example, it goes even a step further because there are no chords. That's plain and simple. And so how do you bring together harmony and melody? Do you do it consciously, or is it just like the heart that speaks?
Well, thanks for these kind words. There are many issues that you raised by saying these few sentences about monodic instrument, about how do you create a harmony or the illusion of a harmony. I think it's not in the instrument, it's in the music. It's in the intention. What we have to find is the intention in order to make it work. And I can tell you, I started first when I was 6 years old on the recorder to learn how to read music, and some of the pieces I was reading were Bach suites transcribed for the recorder. And then later on, when I was a student in the conservatory, 10, 12 years later, I had books like those, Bach Studien for solo flutes. It's various movements from the cello suite, from the violin partitas and sonatas for instruments alone. And surprisingly, in the catalog of Bach works, they follow each other. First the violin works, then the cello works, and then the flute works, starting with the partita for flute alone. The suites have a different size. There's always a prelude, and there are always minuets. There are always more information. There are always more material that he's playing with around. And it's about really creating the illusion of suspension, of breaking the simple pulse. You have been talking in your previous episode about upbeats also. Very often it starts with an upbeat, but sometimes it's an anacruise, which is an even longer thing. You start and actually the beat was there before you even started playing. You have sometimes two lines if you look at your sarabande, for example. Of course, with the broken chords, you do have a bass line that every cellist who played a little bit of continuo know very well. And you have, of course, a melodic line that every cellist who is playing a little bit of sonata and concerto knows extremely well also. So combining both makes out of this monodic line a polyphony. And I guess we can find solutions with articulation. For example, if you have a consistent articulation on one top line and a consistent articulation on the lower line, not meaning that you have the same rubato all the time, but the same way of poising, of getting a certain pace on those different voices, it will be audible to the person listening to you in this way. And then we can identify two voices talking to us. And by having two voices, you already create a space for hearing something in between. And this is where, yes, should it be flat? Should it be natural? Is it going up? Is it going down? Within, there's room for fantasy, actually. And probably invention and fantasy are key words that Bach didn't use so much, maybe, of course, for the inventions, but look at Telemann fantasies that were written before. There were studies basically on every key for a monodic instrument, flute, oboe, or violin, for example. This tentative to describe a tonality and see what you can do with it has been done as such by Telemann. I think Bach had a less methodical approach. He had a lot more fun with the instrument itself. Mm-hmm. And he was trying, I think, also, and this is something I learned a lot from people like Trevor Pinnock, but also from jazz musicians, such as Brad Meldau or Jackie Terrason, whom I learned a lot from in terms of the Baroque music and the art of improvisation. It's that they are messing around with tonalities, with keys, with rhythms, with chords, and then suddenly taking a break where you wouldn't expect it and then go on. This is something that not jazzmen have invented, but that Bach had been playing because he was also a great improviser of his own, and he loved to play with all that stuff that we call music.
That's so good. That's so good to hear what you say about the composer himself playing, and I mean playing in the sense of having the taste for having fun also with harmonies while telling us very, very deep things. That's so true, and that's funny because the question that I was not able to go through today about from Guido Wardak about memory was talking about this, that also in terms of memorizing, isn't it a central thing? And of course I think it is, and I'm sure you will agree, Emmanuel, that the interest in the moment you are learning a piece for the details, for what's happening, for everything, that's the key, actually. That's probably the main key to memory. But that would be another subject, unless you have something to say about this, Emmanuel. Well,
I do have something to add up to this, because it's true, when you learn a piece by memory, you incorporate it better. So then you don't play the music like reading in a conference. You're being the music later on where you play, because it comes out of you. It's not, you don't have this accessory of the music. So of course you make it your own, and you express it, of course, in a very different way. It comes directly, in an more obvious manner. Nevertheless, of course, in the situation of the concert, and given the amount of music, of different music that we have to deal with, sometimes it's not possible to play music by memory in front of an audience, just because of all that stress. You're not able to deliver your best performance if you haven't had the time to prepare, to really focus on it before. So this is why in competitions it's required so often. When you're young, you can learn so much. So for young students, I guess it's not a challenge. It's a good training and a great habit to do, because you go more in depth, more in detail, and you make yourself comfortable in the home of Bach in this example. Mm-hmm. But of course, later on, as a professional, if you have to play one evening Dvorak and then the next day Bach suite, and the following day some contemporary music that you have been practicing and reading and discovering, of course you may make some mistakes in the Bach, which would be fatal because everybody hears them.
Right. We had a very interesting discussion last week with Stephen Iselis about this, about memory. Maybe a last question, Emmanuel, about what I call the third dimension for us. So sometimes for us string players, you know, the problem we learn, I don't know about my colleagues, but the first lessons, you know, I learned to pull the bow this way on the string, you know, to produce a sound, you know, and then back. And that's what basically that's where I started, you know. And it took me many years to realize that actually basically 98% of the music making we are doing has to deal with this dimension, with the vertical dimension, and so with my students we're working a lot on it, and I am with myself working a lot on it. So and I don't know, look, I don't want to use too many superlatives while you are there, but we have played a lot together, and I know nobody who manages to go so much, to have such a variety of in the sound in terms of being at the really at the core of the sound, where you have the feeling, you feel the mass of the sound when you really go at it, and then to this little last shimmer, no, I don't know, I'm not sure, this little sparkle of sound before we go into silence. Any, I don't know, any tip that you think could be even usable by cellists, or about how to, or do you want to tell us something about this, about this dimension in the sound, you know, going in, going out?
I hope I understand what you're talking about.
Sorry.
But I guess it has a lot to do with breathing, which is something that we must not forget. That's the first thing we do when we come to Earth. We scream. It's the first breath, actually, that we're taking. It's unfolding the lungs. And from that moment on, we will be dependent on this system, heart and lungs, for living, for being alive. Music is one form of being alive, one of many forms. And we should never forget to breathe while we're making music. And therefore, we can, depending on how we have been preparing before the first notes that we're playing in that movement, we can give it a lot of depth, a lot of accentuation. Or we can just whisper it, or we can just, sometimes you were looking for a word, for a sparkle of a sound or something. I would even say a perfume of a sound. You know, something that reminds you of something, or recalls the memory of a sound. I think this is something that is probably the whole range that we have to deal with, whatever the composer writes in their music. And with Bach, fortunately, there are not that many indications, which leaves a lot of freedom in the same time, but we have to find the rules of the game in order not to go anywhere just because we can, and to make a consistent conversation with our host, Johann Sebastian Bach in this case. And I find this fascinating, this repertoire, because while practicing the cello suites, I don't do this publicly. Honestly, it's just a practice for me. Some of my colleagues do this. They also play the Paganini Caprice publicly, wonderfully, etc. I find all of that is a challenge, and I find it extremely interesting, but I keep it for myself because it makes me a better musician. But I don't think it's something that goes near to what the original is, like the cello suites, of course, on the cello, in this case. And this density of the sound is something that I have been admiring a lot from pianists, such as Steven Kovacevic, for example, or Martha Argerich, or Daniel Barenboim. So I'm referring to old school pianists, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings there. But just because of the age, you could say it is old school pianist. And I remember talking with them individually about how do you do this depth in the sound. How can you start singing, connect notes on an instrument that's actually a percussion instrument, as a keyboard is, actually. And in the end, it was always I felt it was not the instrument. It was because they were in need of that line, in need of connecting notes, projecting the sound, projecting their idea, and they would find all the strength and the power in their body and align all of their muscles and energy and bundle this in order to project their sound and their phrasing. Their intention was stronger than anything else. This is why they are irresistible musicians, actually, when you play with them. And I guess this brings in a lot of things together. Now, it's not something easy to teach, I guess, but then there must be ways of analyzing this. Of course, when you see the motion of the hand of a string player, you see components, as you were saying, of horizontality. But you also see with the angulation of the various parts of the arm and the position of the shoulder where this gesture comes from. Is there in the upper body or in the lower body while you're sitting? Are you comfortable? Do you have the power and the strength to move the arms freely? I think all of these things do play a very important role in the sound that you're going to project, and also in the articulation, therefore in the phrasing. and in the meaning of the music that you're going to be playing.
Emmanuel, thank you so much. It was wonderful. Say hello to Berlin from Freiburg.
Yes, well, rainy day today in Berlin, but that's good for more practice and a little more music at home.
Great. I hope we are soon again able to play live together.
We should be together in August, I guess, in the south of France.
Yes, that's true. In the festival in Salon de Provence. Absolutely.
Everything is confirmed now. So keep thumbs up and congratulations for your great work. And thanks for hosting me for a few Q&As like this. It's always great to see you, and I'm looking forward to more from you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Everybody, I see you next Friday, 7 o'clock, with my guest this time will be the actor Lambert Wilson, who is also a singer and who is crazy about music.